Hi, I'm Daniel Gold, and welcome to the Gold Standard Leadership Lab. By day, I'm a partner at a leading advisory firm where I draw upon my background as an attorney to help my clients succeed. This podcast, though, is my personal project, completely separate and apart from my day job, but reflects the same passion that I exhibit everywhere for teaching, mentoring, and helping others succeed through simple, impactful lessons. It is my hope that you'll walk away with practical takeaways to help you on your leadership journey. Thanks for being a part of this community and for joining me in the Leadership Lab. Let's get started. The best professional relationships in your life probably don't feel professional, at least not anymore. I'd like you to think about the people that are in your orbit right now, the ones you actually call when something goes sideways. The ones you refer without hesitation. The ones who have been with you through 2 or 3 companies or maybe even more. When you trace those relationships back to where they started, they probably didn't begin with polish. They began with something real. I want to talk about that today because I think most of us have been handed a version of a professional relationship building exercise that is probably, fundamentally broken. The leaders who figure out that early are the ones who spend less time networking and more time building something that actually lasts. Let me name something that most of us know but rarely actually say out loud. Most professional interactions are performances. You walk into a meeting, a networking event, or a client dinner, and both parties are running, a kind of a script. How was the flight? Tell me about your background. What does your firm specialize in? We should connect. It's not insincere, exactly. It's managed, carefully managed. You're presenting a version of yourself that has been edited for that room. If you remember from episode 34, I talked about performance theater within organizations, how leaders optimize for optics over outcomes, and speaking fluently about strategy without committing to anything actionable. We call this impression management. It's basically the process by which people attempt to control the impressions that others form of them. What I want to name here is that the same dynamic plays out in our external relationships, at the cocktail party, at the industry conference, at the client dinner. The settings change, but the mechanism is identical. You're performing a version of yourself rather than, simply being yourself. And here's the real cost. When you're performing, you're not learning. You're not paying attention to the person across from you in a genuine way. You're waiting for the next line. Look, I've been in professional services for over 2 decades now, and the relationships that have actually moved the needle in my career, the ones that led to new opportunities, meaningful referrals, introductions to people who changed the course of my work, those relationships did not begin with a performance. They began with a conversation in which both people dropped the script and became genuinely interested in each other. That crossing point is what I want to unpack because it doesn't happen by accident and it's not beyond our control. About 20 years ago, I started building relationships with 2 people. For purposes of today, I'll call them Adam and Bob. Both worked in adjacent spaces to mine. Both were professionals I had legitimate business reasons to know. And for a while, those relationships looked like most professional relationships. Useful, pleasant, appropriately transactional. We'd connect when there was a reason to connect, we'd share what was relevant and hold back what was not. But at some point, something shifted. It happened differently with each of them, but the mechanism was the same. We got curious about each other. With Adam, I started asking real questions about how his firm made technology decisions, not because I was selling anything, but because I genuinely wanted to understand his thinking. Why did he choose one platform over another? What was the architecture behind that choice? He started asking me the same kind of questions back. What was I seeing in the market? How was I thinking about a particular problem? We stopped transactioning and we started learning from one another. Now, with Bob, the dynamic was similar. We were both running different parts of different businesses, and at some point, our conversations became a place where we could think out loud, test ideas, and ask the uncomfortable questions you can't ask inside your own organization. Bob told me once and directly and without hedging not to take a particular job. Flat out told me it was the wrong move for me. That kind of honesty doesn't live in a transactional relationship. It shows up when someone is genuinely invested in your outcome, not just the next transaction. So now, nearly 20 years later, Adam and Bob are two of the most important people in my professional life. Adam once convinced me to make a career move that turned out to be exactly right. Bob has introduced me to people who changed the direction of my work. None of that was planned. All of it became possible because at some point, both of us crossed that relationship line from professional to real, from transactional to actually authentic and substantive. The question worth sitting with is what created the conditions for that crossing? Here's what I've come to believe. The crossing point isn't a moment of vulnerability, though vulnerability can in fact do it. And it isn't a shared crisis, though those accelerate things for sure. It isn't simply time, though time does help. I think the crossing point happens when both people in a relationship stop performing and start learning. Mental curiosity, that is the mechanism. And I want to be specific about what that means because it's different from what most relationship advice tells you. Finding common ground is fine, it's acceptable. Asking about someone's hobbies, their family, their team, those conversations, they all have their place. But what I'm describing goes deeper. It's genuine intellectual curiosity about how someone thinks, about the choices they've made and why, about what they know that you don't, about where their model of the world diverges from yours, and what that gap might actually teach you. When that kind of curiosity is mutual, something changes. The other person feels it, and it's not flattery. It's not a networking technique. It's respect. People respond to being genuinely respected in a way that they simply don't respond to being charmed or pitched. If you recall from episode 38, I laid out the curiosity cycle and how asking better questions changes not just your communication, but your culture. The same principle applies here. In your external relationships with clients, with peers, with the people you want to know for the next 20 years, authentic curiosity is the practice. The relationship is the outcome. Now, I want to bring in one more thread here because it connects directly with what we just explored in episode 55 on reputation. In that episode, I framed reputation as a compounding ledger. Every interaction either makes a deposit or a withdrawal, and over time, the ledger builds into something that precedes you into every room you walk into. Relationships compound the same way, through a different kind of mechanism though. I know someone in client services who no longer needs to take new clients. Her existing clients stay. Her existing clients refer others. Those referrals arrive pre-qualified because the people who sent them already know exactly who she is and what she brings. New relationships start from a warmer, more honest place because they arrive with context and trust already built in. Look, that's not circumstance. That's the outcome of years of showing up in a very specific way. Being genuinely present, caring about client outcomes rather than transactions. Being, to borrow the language from the book I quote often here on the Gold Standard Leadership Lab, Raving Fans, the kind of professional people talk about. What I think is underappreciated about her situation is this. Her clients aren't just loyal because she's skilled at what she does, they're loyal because they fit. She has a particular quality, a directness, a lack of pretense, and the people who value those qualities around her, they stay. The ones who didn't fit, well, they don't stay, and that's fine. But you know what? That's the point. That is what I mean when I say you are the filter. The quality of your professional relationships over time is a function of how authentically you show up. Authenticity attracts alignment, and alignment creates loyalty. And loyalty, compounded over years, generates the kind of referral cycle that means you stop chasing clients and you start choosing them. Now, let me bring this back to leadership specifically because there's a layer here that goes beyond client development. If you manage a team, which you likely do as a leader, your people are watching how you show up in relationships. They're watching whether you're interested in them is real or it's managed. They're watching whether you ask genuine questions or just good sounding ones. And they're watching whether you are curious about how they think, not just how they produce. The leaders who build genuinely loyal, high-performing teams are almost always the ones who have crossed the same threshold with their people that I described with Adam and Bob. They stopped managing the performance of leadership and started being genuinely curious about the humans that they work alongside. In episode 49, I argued that a team worth belonging to is built on something real, not a mission statement or a quarterly theme. The through line across all of these episodes is exactly the same. Authenticity is the mechanism. Curiosity is the daily practice. And the outcome, whether it's a client relationship that spans 2 decades or a team that stays through a hard season, it's built from the same exact foundation. Most of what we've been taught about professional relationship building is a skill you practice on other people. You learn the opener, the follow-up, and the LinkedIn connection request. You get better at that performance. But look, what I'm suggesting is different and it's simpler. The most important thing you can do for your professional relationships is drop the performance and get genuinely curious about the person across from you and what they know and how they think, about what they're trying to figure out. That curiosity, when it's real, is what moves a relationship from transactional to lasting. And lasting relationships are where the real work of a career happens. So the question I'll leave you with is this. Are you actually curious about the people in your professional orbit, or are you just being cordial? Because there is a difference, and the people worth knowing, well, they can always tell. And remember, leadership isn't about perfection. It is about progress. So take this lesson, put it into action, and continue setting the gold standard in your own life and at work. I'll see you all next time.